A child was hit so hard he lost consciousness. His mother told the police he fell down the stairs. That single lie set off a chain of events that would eventually lead to a brutal murder 30 years later. This is the story of how one act of deception didn't protect a family. Instead, it destroyed 3 families and left a man serving a life sentence in prison. This is the story of how one lie created a murderer. In 1985, the Hartwell family appeared to be picture perfect. They lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Philadelphia. Robert Hartwell was a decorated police officer with 15 years on the force. His colleagues described him as professional, reliable, and well-respected. He had received multiple commendations for his work. He coached his son's Little League baseball team. He attended church every Sunday with his family. To everyone who knew him, Robert Hartwell was a good man, a devoted father, and a dedicated officer of the law. His wife, Catherine, was a beloved elementary school teacher. Parents would request to have their children in her classroom. Her students adored her. She stayed late after school to help struggling students. She baked cookies for class fundraisers. She volunteered at the local food bank. Catherine was the kind of person that everyone spoke about warmly. She was nurturing, patient, and kind. She represented the best of what a teacher could be. Their son Marcus was 9 years old when this story truly begins. He was a quiet, thoughtful child. His teachers noted that he was intelligent, but somewhat withdrawn. He didn't have a large friend group, preferring to spend his time reading or playing alone. He was well behaved at school. He did his homework without being asked. At home, he was the kind of son that any parent would be proud of. He was respectful to his parents. He helped with chores without complaining. He was polite to adults and to his peers. By all external appearances, the Hartwell family was stable, functional, and happy. But beneath this perfect facade, something very different was happening behind closed doors. Robert Hartwell had a serious alcohol addiction that he hid from the world. He maintained his job and his public image, but at night, when he came home from his shift, he drank heavily. He would consume half a bottle of whiskey or more in an evening. As he drank, his personality would change completely. He became emotionally volatile, prone to sudden anger, verbally abusive. He would criticize Catherine for perceived failures as a wife and mother. He would accuse her of infidelities that had never occurred. He would belittle her appearance and her abilities. He was a different person when he drank. A darker version of himself that seemed to take pleasure in hurting the people closest to him. Catherine tried to manage the situation as best she could. She learned the patterns of his drinking. She learned which topics would set him off. She learned to apologize even when she had done nothing wrong, simply to keep the peace. She convinced herself that if she could just be a better wife, if she could anticipate his needs better, if she could keep the house cleaner or the meals more perfectly prepared, then maybe he would drink less. She blamed herself for his behavior, not recognizing that she was in an abusive relationship, not wanting to acknowledge what was happening in her own home. In the 1980s, domestic abuse was far less discussed and far more hidden than it is today. Catherine felt ashamed. She worried about what people would think if they knew. She was afraid of the social consequences of leaving him. She was afraid of being alone, so she stayed and she endured, and she tried to make it work. Marcus absorbed all of this from his bedroom upstairs. He heard his father's harsh voice, his mother's quiet responses, the tension that filled the house. Learned that love could be conditional and could be weaponized. He learned that the person you lived with could hurt you. He learned that safety was not guaranteed, even in your own home. He developed anxiety. He became more withdrawn. He had trouble sleeping, but he never said anything to anyone. Children in that era weren't encouraged to talk about family problems. It was considered a private matter, something that should be handled within the family, something that should never be discussed with outsiders. Marcus internalized everything, carrying the weight of his family's dysfunction on his small shoulders. On a cold November evening in 1993, when Marcus was 14 years old, something happened that would alter the trajectory of his entire life. Robert came home from work in a particularly foul mood. He had been passed over for a promotion. A younger officer, someone he considered less qualified and less dedicated than himself, has been selected for the role instead. Robert was humiliated and angry. He had spent his entire shift stewing about it, and by the time he arrived home, he was looking for someone to blame. He found his target in Catherine. He accused her of not supporting him adequately, of not being ambitious enough as a wife to push him toward success, of holding him back. The accusations were irrational and unfounded, but Robert wasn't interested in rationality. He was interested in dominance and having someone smaller and weaker than himself to rage at. Catherine tried to defend herself. She reminded him of how proud she was of him, of how much she valued his work, of how hard she worked to support the family. But every word she spoke only inflamed him further. Robert became increasingly verbally abusive. He called her names that should never be spoken in anyone's home. He told her that she was a disappointment, that she had failed as a wife and as a mother, that he regretted ever marrying her. He told her that she was worthless, and that her career as a teacher was meaningless and insignificant compared to his role as a police officer. Catherine began to cry, which only seemed to fuel his anger more. He saw her tears not as a sign that he had hurt her, but as weakness, as something to be scorned and mocked. He could hear the cruelty in his father's voice, the pain in his mother's responses. He felt a rage building inside him that he had never experienced before. For years, he had been quiet, compliant, trying to be the perfect son so that maybe, just maybe, his father would be different, his home would be different, his family would be different. But he finally reached his breaking point. He couldn't listen to his father attack his mother anymore. He couldn't remain silent while his mother was being destroyed verbally. Marcus stormed downstairs and confronted his father directly. He was 14 years old, still growing into his adult body. Small compared to his father, who was a large man with the physical strength that came from years of police training and work. But Marcus was filled with a righteous anger that made him feel bigger than he was. He told his father to stop. He said that his mother didn't deserve to be treated this way. He said that his father's behavior was cruel and wrong. He said that if Robert wanted to be angry, he should be angry at Marcus, not at his mother. In all his years of abuse, no one had ever stood up to him. Catherine had learned to accept his behavior. Marcus had been quiet and compliant. But now his teenage son was challenging him, was telling him that his behavior was unacceptable, was defending his mother. In Robert's mind, this was an affront to his authority, a challenge to his dominance. He responded with physical aggression. Robert grabbed Marcus by the arm and yanked him forward. Marcus tried to pull away, but his father was stronger and more experienced with physical confrontation. Robert threw Marcus against the wall with considerable force. Marcus's head struck the wall near a light switch. The impact was severe enough to cause him to lose consciousness immediately. He crumpled to the floor. For a moment, there was absolute silence in the house. Catherine screamed. She rushed to Marcus, checking if he was breathing, if he was responsive. Marcus was unconscious but alive. There was blood on the wall where his head had struck. There would be significant bruising. Robert, suddenly aware of what he had done, suddenly aware that he had crossed a line from emotional abuse to physical assault on his son, suddenly aware that he might face serious legal consequences, left the house. He went to a bar and drank himself into oblivion. He didn't stay to help his son. He didn't call for medical assistance. He abandoned his family to deal with the consequences of his violence. Catherine was in a state of panic. Marcus was unconscious and bleeding. She didn't know if he had a concussion, or a skull fracture, or internal bleeding. She knew that she needed to get him to a hospital immediately. She gently moved him, trying not to exacerbate any potential spinal injuries, and carried him to the car. She drove to the nearest emergency room, arriving at 11:47 p.m. Medical staff rushed Marcus into the trauma center. A CT scan revealed a significant concussion and some bruising to the brain tissue. He was admitted for overnight observation. Doctors told Catherine that Marcus was lucky. Another inch to the side, and the injury could have been far more serious. Over the next few hours, as Marcus remained unconscious in a hospital bed, Catherine faced a terrible decision. The doctors were asking her how Marcus had been injured. They asked if he had fallen. They asked if he had been in an accident. They asked if there were any suspicious circumstances. Catherine knew that if she told the truth, she reported that her husband had thrown their son against a wall, Robert would face criminal charges. He would likely go to prison. Her family would be destroyed. The scandal would be enormous. As a police officer's wife, she would be questioned and judged. She would be blamed for not leaving earlier, for staying in an abusive situation, for not protecting her son. She was terrified. Catherine made a choice that she believed was protecting her family, but that actually set off a catastrophic chain of events. She told the doctors that Marcus had fallen down the stairs. It was a simple lie. It's an easy lie. A lie that would allow her to leave the hospital with her son, go home, and pretend that everything was fine. The doctors accepted her explanation. They didn't push back. They didn't ask more questions. Falls down the stairs happen to teenagers all the time. It was a plausible explanation for the injuries. Marcus woke up the next morning with a terrible headache and no memory of being thrown against the wall. The last thing he remembered was confronting his father. After that, there was only darkness. When Catherine told him that he had fallen down the stairs, he accepted it. His memory was foggy from the concussion. He wasn't sure what had happened. He trusted his mother's account of events, believed her lie. What Catherine didn't understand when she told that lie was that she was unjust, protecting her family in the short term. She was laying the foundation for a fundamental breakdown in how her son understood trust, family, and relationships. That single lie taught Marcus something crucial. The people closest to you, the people you love and trust, will lie to protect themselves and to maintain appearances. They will prioritize the family reputation over your safety and well-being. They will choose comfort over truth. Marcus was discharged from the hospital 3 days later. He returned to school and tried to resume his normal life. But something inside him had changed. He was no longer the quiet, compliant son who believed that if he was just good enough, if he just followed the rules, everything would be okay. He had learned that being good didn't protect you. He had learned that his mother would lie to cover up violence. He had learned that the system his father worked for, the police department, could be evaded and manipulated. Over the next few years, Marcus withdrew further from his family. He was polite and respectful in public, but at home, there was a coldness to him now. He didn't seek his mother's affection. He was cautious around his father, never alone with him, never vulnerable. He spent most of his time in his room. He developed a few close friendships. He was intelligent and did well in school, but his teachers noted that he seemed to carry a heaviness that other teenagers didn't have. There was a distance in his eyes, a guardedness that suggested he had experienced something that had changed him fundamentally. Catherine noticed the change in her son. She knew that she had failed to protect him. She knew that her lie had consequences, though she didn't fully understand what those consequences would be. She tried to reconnect with him, to repair the damage, but Marcus kept her at arm's length. She wanted to tell him the truth, to explain that she had been trying to protect him. The lie had been an act of love, not betrayal. But she couldn't bring herself to do it. It was easier to let the lie stand. It was easier to pretend that she had told the truth, that her son had fallen down the stairs, that the family narrative was accurate and accepted. Robert never acknowledged what had happened, drank as heavily as ever, but he never laid hands on Marcus again. Whether this was because he was afraid of the consequences, or because he was ashamed, or because he simply recognized that Marcus was no longer a child that he could easily dominate, nobody knew. He and Marcus never discussed the incident. It became a ghost in the house, something that everyone knew about but that no one spoke about. It was the lie that formed the foundation of the family's dysfunction, fundamental falseness that infected every interaction and every relationship within the family. Marcus graduated from high school with honors and received a full scholarship to a prestigious university. He was accepted to study psychology. Ironically, the field that would help him understand the dysfunction of his own life, though he wasn't interested in turning that understanding toward healing himself. When he left home for college, Catherine felt a profound sense of relief. She believed that distance from the family would be good for him, that he would mature and develop healthier perspectives. She was wrong. At university, Marcus was able to construct the perfect facade. He was intelligent, articulate, and had learned over years of living in his family how to appear fine when he was deeply troubled. He did well academically. He made acquaintances, though he had difficulty forming genuine friendships. He participated in psychology discussion groups. He seemed like any other successful college student. But beneath the surface, the anger and the resentment were still there, festering, growing. He kept detailed journals filled with misanthropic philosophies and dark fantasies. He spent hours online in forums dedicated to people who felt wronged by society, who believed that they were fundamentally superior to other people, who had convinced themselves that their isolation and lack of connection was due to other people's stupidity rather than to their own emotional dysfunction. During his junior year of college, Marcus developed an obsession with a graduate student named Rebecca. She was everything he thought he should want: intelligent, accomplished, beautiful, kind. He attended her class, even though it wasn't required for his major. He sat in the front row so that she would notice him. He made comments during discussion that he hoped would impress her. He showed up at her office hours under the pretense of needing academic help, but really just to be near her. Rebecca was friendly and professional, but she didn't reciprocate his feelings. She saw him as a student, nothing more.
Ow.
Marcus began to monitor her more closely. He found out where she lived. He researched her daily schedule. He watched her from a distance as she went about her life. He created fantasies about her, about scenarios where she would finally notice him, where she would understand how special he was, where she would love him. When Rebecca started dating one of the other graduate students, Marcus fell into a dark depression. He became obsessive and controlling. He would show up at places where he knew she would be. He would create situations where he would accidentally run into her. He left notes for her in her mailbox. He called her repeatedly from blocked numbers. Rebecca became frightened. She reported his behavior to campus security. Marcus was called in and warned about harassment. He was told that if his behavior continued, he would be expelled from the university. The threat of expulsion shook him enough to stop the overt harassment. He stopped showing up at places where Rebecca would be. He stopped calling her, but internally he was furious. He felt victimized by the system. He believed that he was being punished for having feelings, for daring to love someone who was above his social station. He convinced himself that Rebecca was selfish and ungrateful, that she deserved what he had been planning to do to her. Marcus graduated from university with honors. He attended graduate school and earned a degree in organizational psychology. He accepted a position at a consulting firm where he would analyze workplace dynamics and recommend organizational changes. He moved to a major city and built a respectable life. He had a good salary, a nice apartment, and a professional reputation. To everyone who knew him in this context, he seemed like a successful, well-adjusted man. But his personal life was a different story. He had a series of short-term relationships with women that followed a consistent and troubling pattern. He would pursue women intensely, creating an image of himself as the perfect partner. He would say exactly what they wanted to hear. He would perform the role of the ideal boyfriend with mechanical precision. But once he had secured their trust and affection, once they had lowered their defenses and become vulnerable, he would systematically undermine their self-esteem. He would criticize them, mock them, gaslight them. He would isolate them from their friends by convincing them that no one else really understood them, that only he truly appreciated them. He would control their behavior, their clothing, their spending. He would engage in sexual coercion, pushing them to do things they weren't comfortable with. When they objected or tried to leave, he would tell them that they were prudish, ungrateful, or ungrateful for everything he had done for them. He was practicing the infliction of psychological pain. He was refining the ability to manipulate and control people through their emotions. And he was doing it all while maintaining the appearance of a successful, normal man. His colleagues at work had no idea. His family had no idea. His victims were afraid to tell anyone, because he had managed to convince them that they were somehow responsible for his behavior, that they deserved to be treated this way. One woman named Janet became so depressed as a result of Marcus's psychological abuse that she attempted suicide. She survived, but she spent several weeks in a psychiatric hospital. When she was released, she was terrified of Marcus, but she didn't report his behavior. She was ashamed, blamed herself. She convinced herself that she had misunderstood his intentions, that she had overreacted to his attempts to help her. Another woman, named Lisa, left Marcus after he became physically aggressive with her. He had pushed her against a wall, and she had decided that she had endured enough. She obtained a restraining order against him. He violated the restraining order multiple times, showing up at her apartment building and her workplace, until finally, the courts took the threat seriously and he faced the possibility of criminal charges. Only then did he stop. But each interaction with a woman, each relationship that ended with emotional or physical pain, each violation that didn't result in serious legal consequences, reinforced Marcus's belief that he could do whatever he wanted as long as he was careful enough to avoid serious consequences. He was learning that the system was ineffective, that women were weak, and deserved to be manipulated, that his actions, while regrettable in terms of social optics, weren't fundamentally wrong. When Marcus was in his mid-30s, his life took several significant turns. His mother, Catherine, died of a stroke. She was only 61 years old. She had worked herself to death, essentially, her body finally giving out after decades of stress and worry. Marcus attended her funeral and delivered a eulogy that was perfectly appropriate, perfectly measured, perfectly false. He spoke about her dedication and her sacrifice. He talked about how she had done the best she could with the circumstances she had been given. But internally, Marcus felt nothing. He didn't mourn her. He didn't feel grateful for her sacrifices. Instead, he felt a cold satisfaction. She had protected his father's secret for all those years. She had let her marriage destroy her, and now she was gone. He was free from the obligation of family. At the same time, Marcus met a woman named Patricia through a mutual friend. Patricia was intelligent, successful, and had a kind heart. She had never been in a serious relationship. She was lonely and was genuinely looking for a meaningful connection. Marcus recognized her loneliness immediately. It was a vulnerability that he could exploit. He pursued her relentlessly. He told her everything she wanted to hear, made her feel seen and valued and special. He created a fantasy version of himself, a man who was kind and loving and committed to her happiness. Patricia fell in love with the fantasy. She agreed to move in with him after only a few months of dating. She introduced him to her family and her friends. She talked about marriage and children and a future together. And then Marcus began to change. Slowly at first, then more rapidly. He became critical of her appearance. He told her that she was getting fat, that she wasn't doing enough to keep herself attractive for him. He controlled how she dressed, went through her phone constantly, accusing her of cheating despite no evidence. He became jealous and possessive. He isolated her from her friends, telling her that they were toxic influences, that they didn't appreciate her, that he was the only one who truly understood her. He monitored her spending. He required her to ask permission before making any purchases or going anywhere. He gaslighted her, telling her that things had never happened when she clearly remembered them, telling her that she was crazy and paranoid. He became physically aggressive, pushing her against walls, grabbing her forcefully, threatening her. Patricia was trapped. She was living in his apartment. She had quit her job to be with him. She had distanced herself from her friends and family. She was completely dependent on him financially and emotionally. She was terrified to leave because she believed that his threats were serious, that he would hurt her if she tried to leave him. She considered suicide. She called a domestic violence hotline but hung up before talking to anyone, convinced that no one could help her, convinced that she deserved the way he was treating her because she had somehow failed as a girlfriend. After 8 months of escalating abuse, Patricia finally found the courage to leave. She snuck out of the apartment while Marcus was at work. She called her sister, who came and picked her up. She went directly to the police and filed a report. She got a restraining order. She enrolled in therapy to begin the process of healing. Marcus was enraged. He felt betrayed and victimized, even though he was the one who had victimized Patricia. He stalked her obsessively, showed up at her workplace, sent her emails and texts from blocked numbers. He drove past her apartment building. He violated the restraining order multiple times, but the police response was slow. Each time he was warned, but he wasn't arrested. The system that should have protected Patricia seemed powerless to stop Marcus. During this period of obsession with Patricia, Marcus learned that she had started dating another man. His name was David, and he was a kind and caring person who wanted to help Patricia heal from her traumatic relationship with Marcus. They took things slowly. They supported each other. They were building something real and genuine. When Marcus found out about David, something inside him snapped completely. The fantasies about revenge that he had been harboring for months suddenly crystallized into a concrete plan. He became fixated on the idea that David had stolen Patricia from him, that David was ruining his life, that he needed to make David understand the pain he was experiencing, that he needed to make Patricia suffer for rejecting him. Marcus began researching David. He found out where he lived. He found out his daily schedule. He purchased a knife and kept it in his car, spent weeks planning exactly what he was going to do. He imagined the confrontation in detail. He imagined David's fear and pain. He imagined Patricia realizing that she had made a terrible mistake by leaving him. He imagined finally being the one in control, finally being the one with power. The planning was the moment when Marcus crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The fantasies became concrete. The anger became action. The boy who had been thrown against a wall by his father, the teenager who had watched his mother lie to cover it up, The young man who had absorbed the lesson that truth didn't matter as much as appearances had become a man capable of murder. On a Friday evening in March, Marcus followed David and Patricia as they left a restaurant where they had gone for dinner. He watched them laugh together. He watched David put his arm around Patricia's waist. He watched them kiss goodnight. In that moment, the obsessive fantasy became reality. Marcus decided to act. He waited in the parking lot of David's apartment building. When David got out of his car alone, Marcus confronted him. David was confused and concerned. He tried to de-escalate the situation. He told Marcus that he needed to move on, that Patricia deserved to be happy, that they could all just live their lives without this drama. But those words were like gasoline on a fire. Marcus pulled a knife from his jacket and attacked David. David fought back, but he was caught off guard and quickly overwhelmed. Marcus stabbed him multiple times. David fell to the ground, bleeding heavily. Marcus stood over him, breathing hard, shocked at what he had done, but also feeling a strange sense of relief and power. He had finally acted on his rage. He had finally taken control. He had finally made someone pay for the pain he was experiencing. David was rushed to the hospital and pronounced dead on arrival. Marcus fled the scene, went home, showered to remove the blood, and then turned himself in to the police the next morning. During his confession, he talked extensively about his troubled childhood, his mother's lie, his abusive father, his rejection by Patricia, his victimization by a society that didn't understand him. He presented himself as a man who had been wronged, whose pain had driven him to this tragic act. He was a victim, he insisted, as much as David was a victim. If his life had been different, if his mother had told the truth, if his family had been healthier, if Patricia had appreciated him, he would never have done this. Marcus was convicted of murder in the first degree. The court rejected his defense based on his traumatic childhood. While the judge acknowledged that Marcus had experienced pain and dysfunction in his early life, the judge stated that millions of people experience trauma and do not respond by murdering innocent people. Marcus was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Patricia was devastated. She had survived an abusive relationship, only to watch the man she was trying to build a new life with be murdered by her abuser. She lived with guilt and trauma. She attended counseling for years. She struggled to form new relationships, hypervigilant about signs of control or abuse. Her life had been forever altered by the actions of a man who believed that his pain justified his cruelty. David's family was destroyed by grief. His parents lost their son. His siblings lost a brother. His friends lost someone who had brought kindness and light into their lives. The ripples of Marcus's violence extended far beyond the immediate victims. It affected everyone who loved David, everyone who had known him, everyone whose lives he had touched. Marcus sits in a prison cell today, serving a life sentence. He has years to think about his life, about the choices he made, about the person he became. Some might say that he is a victim of his circumstances. Certainly, he experienced real trauma as a child. Certainly, his mother's lie about the fall down the stairs contributed to his distorted understanding of truth and trust. Certainly, his abusive father and his dysfunctional family environment shaped who he became. But Marcus also had agency. He made choices. He chose to obsess over women. He chose to manipulate and control them. He chose to pursue Patricia even after she left him. He chose to stalk her and to violate restraining orders. He chose to purchase a knife and plan a murder. He chose to cross the line from thought to action, from fantasy to reality. The story of how one lie created a murderer is not a story about a single moment or a single decision. It's a story about how small acts of deception can have enormous consequences. It's about how protecting a family reputation in the short term can create long-term damage that manifests across decades and across multiple lives. It's about the importance of accountability, of truth, and of breaking cycles of abuse rather than perpetuating them. Catherine Hartwell's lie about her son falling down the stairs was told with good intentions. She believed she was protecting her family, but in doing so, she taught her son that truth was negotiable, that appearances were more important than reality, that families were built on deception. She taught him that accountability didn't matter as much as maintaining a facade. She taught him that love could be conditional and could be used as justification for lies and for covering up abuse.